and welcome to our second week. This is part 2 of our quilted potholder. Now, if you remember last week, we quilted the top part of our potholder. Today we are going to finish our potholder. So this is actually the quilt top. That's what this is called, is the quilt top. Today we are going to be putting a batting or cushioning material between the layers of the quilt top and the quilt back. So we're going to basically sandwich this between the top and the bottom layers. You want to make sure that your batting is heat resistant, that it is thick enough. So like I had said last week, using an old washcloth is perfect, although I would double the washcloth so it's extra thick because you don't want to get burned from your potholder. You want to make sure it's thick enough. So this is that perfect excuse to get rid of those old nasty looking washcloths that you've got. They work perfect and they're just slightly larger so you don't have to do a whole lot of trimming. You can also use an old towel and cut it down. So you are going to want to cut whatever material you use as your batting to 6 inches by 6 inches in order to fit comfortably, because you don't want it to run all the way to the edge of your quilt top or quilt back, because it'll just make it a little too heavy to sew through by the time you put your seams and everything in. So again, you want to cut your quilting batting to 6 inches by 6 inches. Your quilt back, which is of course the back part of your quilt, you want to cut to 6.5 inches by 6.5 inches to allow for your seam allowance. So let's get started on this week's finished tutorial for our potholder. I now have my bottom, my top, and my batting, which I had a lot of this scrap left over, so I just layered it several layers thick, and that will go in between. So we are going to cheat a little. We are going to lay our backing down first, face side up, right side up. Then we are going to take our quilt top and we are going to lay it on top. And then we are going to take our batting and lay it on top of that. Now we're going to pin it in place and we're going to sew it around 3 of the sides and then about halfway across the final side, because we're going to be turning it inside out. So I'm going to pin that and do it. So if you'd like to pause your video, we will do that portion and then come back. I'm going to remove all of the pins. And we are going to turn it right side out. Now I'm going to use my scissors slightly just to kind of push into the corners to make sure they're fully opened up. And there we go. It's been fully opened up and turned right side out. The batting is on the inside. Now I'm just going to sew by hand and tuck this little teeny section in here. Once we sew this across here, we are ready to do the actual quilting itself. Now there's different ways of quilting. We could just put little tufts in the corner like the quilt I showed you in the beginning of our video last week. Or you could do what is called sewing in the ditch, which is actually sewing right along where the seams are. So you could do that. Or you could do just random sewing all over the face of it. You could put a design in sewing. So the actual quilting is where the individuality comes along as well, because you can, as I said, you can create it however you want. I'm going to use, actually, since this is something small, I'm going to use my sewing machine, and I'm just going to kind of do a random pattern. I might go straight across some of these lines and tie them together. So yeah, I'm going to experiment and we'll see what we get. So here you can see my finished pot holder. You can also see that some of my squares got a little wonky here. This one's more of a rectangle than a square, but it is just a pot holder. So I just sort of went across from point to point across my squares in a couple of different directions. And so that is our finished pot holder. So I hope you have enjoyed this series at Crafting at CCPL. If you have, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe down below. Thanks for watching.